Hi, and welcome to the second part of the Business Technology webinar hosted by Sofigate. Today we're going to deep dive into the 5 disciplines of the operating model, and it's a follow-up from the first webinar where we did a deep dive into some of the details and also navigated around the managedbt.org website. That webinar is available on YouTube if you're interested. We're hosting this webinar on Zoom. If you would like to ask questions or write comments, please use the chat function. Could somebody write something in the chat function to see that the voice and picture works fine? Thank you. Today we have a number of speakers, subject matter experts, and to the left you see Anna Wilsby, who will be talking about the demand discipline. Klaus will talk about the development discipline, Christian the service discipline, Henric sourcing, and Gustaf will close the session with strategy and governance. Welcome all. As you might have recalled from the last session, we went through all the details of the business technology standard with the mindset, the operating model, the capability model, and roles and responsibilities. All this is available on the link that you can see on the page. Today we're going to deep dive into the operating model on the next page. On the highest level, you can see the value stream going from left to right, and every organization has its own value streams, but they can be divided into 3 parts. As you can see on the picture, and then they will go into the operating model with the demand, development, and service disciplines surrounded by sourcing and strategy and governance. I would like to hand over to Anna Wilsby, my colleague, to discuss and present the demand side of the operating model. Please, Anna.
Thank you, Björn. So I will talk about the demand discipline and specifically the demand to request flow, as you can see here on this slide. Let's start off with the purpose of the demand to request flow is really to manage the demand portfolio, to keep control of all the different customer or business demands that is being handed over to IT in some way or another. And the purpose of the process is to turn business intentions into concrete actions, starting off by capturing the need, perhaps doing some prototyping, feasibility study, before creating the final output, which is a development request that is approved and prioritized. Of course, this process also will result in early rejects, so we're making sure that we're doing the right things moving forward and the reasoning why these demands have been rejected. To help us through the demand to request flow, we have 4 types of demand. And that's really because setting the decision process and to some extent also tell us on how this demand is to be developed. Well, we talk about 4 different types, as I said. Capability planning, which is major business capability development, like a new CRM system, new ERP or something like that, a major change to the IT landscape. Second, ideas and concept, which is more of the innovation stream around idea generation and capturing and challenging the status quo. Third one we call increments, improvements, which is enhancements to existing solutions available. And last but not least, the service change, which is improvements to existing services. If you look at this flow that we go into a bit more details, there are a couple of circles early where it says evaluation. And the purpose of those circles are sort of to do an evaluation or walk through to see how to proceed with this demand, and if it needs to be redefined, what type of demand it is. And we call these minimal viable governance. So it's a structure for making the decision as fast and as early as possible in the process. So if we look a bit at the process, starting at the bottom with the service change, which is the most straightforward demand, just taking a change request, a service change into a change request. Normally very small type of service changes. Increments and improvements goes into evaluation to see whether it's been correctly classified, might be reclassified if that's the case. And from that handed over to a development request. Ideas and concepts can either go more or less straight into development, or really through more of a feasibility prototyping exercise, as you can see at the top, going into a development initiative with further analysis, business casing, and reprioritization, making sure it's aligned with the enterprise architecture and that it goes into the portfolio. Last but not least, we have the capability planning, which is the biggest one. Again, also with the evaluation, and then in almost every case into a more deeper analysis feasibility. And at that point in time, we are ready to hand over to the next part in the process. But before we do that, I'll briefly share 2 examples of what we've been doing at customer sites around the demand to request flow. It really has to do with the first one, demand capturing, and the other one is around minimal viable governance. One client, we introduced the new ways of working, and it changed the business interface from IT, creating a couple of new roles and role descriptions. And what we did very easily was to connect the different roles, key roles in the user interface, with the different parts in the organization where they would have their primarily speaking partner. And as you see, those arrows are going both ways. So it's both capturing demand from the business and also promoting the services provided by IT. So the output of this exercise was clarified key contact points for demand capturing and promoting of the available services. The other example is around also new ways of working, where the project resulted in a more centralized IT delivery and also creating some concerns that the decision process would be prolonged. So by then setting a structured process for decision making, putting it as far out in the organization you can, shortened the time to market for these changes. So based on checklists or checks to be done in these areas, like people, do we have the resources, do I have the money, is it aligned with strategy, etc. If everything was green, it was just to proceed with the change. So it was self-governed. If there was a no to any of these questions, either you would go back and look at the solution, see whether you could correct it or not. The demand might be rejected or escalated first to the steer co for decision. And if even further escalation was needed, it was moved into more strategic decision for the portfolio. Yes, those was 2 examples from the demand to request flow. So by this, we're ready for development.
Thank you, Anna. I'm handing over to Klaus for development. Klaus, please.
Thank you, Björn. Anna, you have explained the demand process, and from there we start with the development. So we are taking over from demand, the development portfolio, and we in the management of this portfolio, there is a decision taken how this will be handled, and from organizational point of view, you can divide it into different areas. The development requests, which are basically a little bit more complex initiatives, can be handled in a sequential way or in incremental development. sequential development is classically be handled as a program or project, or might be a simple release project. Incremental development is usually handled as a sprint based flow or a release flow. But there's as well another way to organize it, and this is the ITIL-based change, where more or less complex changes are handled, and still they are following the flow of design, develop, and validate. The entire change of all of these are governed by a gate-based model, which has, depending on the organization, a certain amount of gates which are followed. And the handover is to operations is as well governed by a change advisory board. This change advisory board will indicate more or less if the solution or the change itself is mature to go further into the live system, which will be tested previously. The entire process is supported by a management system. So it is a single source of truth in this system to support all the change initiatives. The Development Management Office is governing and supporting this process by providing resources, managing dependencies, and helping out in the implementation of these projects. So that is the development in a very general base. So we have implemented that in different projects, and I want to continue with a case which we have done in a big company producing renewable materials, and has faced, let's say, a huge transformation program, and their conclusion was that they need to have a little bit more support in the processes. And this transformation included not only the development part, but as well the demand and service areas. So only for the planning, they considered to have the introduction of this model, and they had the goal to improve the collaboration and transparency within the development area. This project led to not only implementing the gate-based model, but it has artifacts as a result, which is a handbook, which is very detailed, describing the processes, the roles, and how it is interacting with business and the other organizational parts. It is having templates, which is describing for certain gates what is expected of the project managers and project members to provide to different other parts of the organization. And it gives as well pocket guidelines to provide information on a very broad view how the process is working. This is actually something which can be given to project members if they are new to the organization. So that was as well something which has been used for communicating through the entire organization in an academy which has been established, and there have been 400 people which have been trained during the implementation phase here. So all the material which has been produced has been used as well for the academy. What has been implemented has been as well the Development Management Office, which I've explained a little bit earlier, which is solely for development, but it has been linked to a project management office and to link together business questions and IT questions, and especially for the development area. So that gave the possibility to train and support development initiatives in a much more effective way. And at the bottom line, the entire model was as well was agile as well. So not agile, but there's taking care of agile way of working. So the organization could as well realize benefits much earlier as it was before. So I think that's what I wanted to say today. So looking forward to the next process part.
Thank you very much, Klaus.
Yeah.
And after development, we're moving into services. Christian Bark, please.
Yes. So now after the, just as Klaus mentioned, after the demand and development, we're now moving into the services or the run part of the model. So this is basically where the services are consumed and we can start to realize the business benefits. So we look into the details there. If we move on. So as Klaus mentioned as well, we're coming into the run stage here where through the, if you look at the left, on the left side, through the service release and the change advisory board and the change management process into the run stage and operations. So the consumption is happening here and here where we can start to, that consumption can start to bring value to the business. We realize those business benefits. In the run environment, we have, if you look at the right side, in most organizations, an ecosystem of service providers. It could be internal or external, but on all aspects, they need to work together to provide seamless services to the business. So if you look at the three different areas that we cover in the service part, so from the top there we have service integration and quality. That is much about making that service ecosystem work together and how we deliver those services seamless between the different service providers and to the business. So covering a lot of the collaboration and make sure that we follow up on the quality and compliance of the execution. And the middle part, we have the maybe more traditional, but service operation, but also automation, which can be everything from AI and robotics, and also we need to, in that operation part, we need to measure the actual outcomes and the performance of the delivery, and make sure that we know the results of that. And you see also there's a feedback loop up to the service portfolio steering and to have all of those insights. So that's very much based on the analytics and the measurements that are being done there. And the third part, of course, is support and services to users, where we establish, have the service desk, of course, to provide service to the users, but also things like setting up a self-help functionality with portals and maybe mobile apps, and also establishing the workflows for different requests that are coming in from the business. Communication is also an important part here, of course, to make sure that the organization is aware of what is happening and get the right information at the right time. All of this is, of course, supported by different tools. So just as in development and other parts, that we have a single source of truth. So everything from monitoring tools and event management, also service management tools and configuration management database, and that kind of solutions, of course, are supporting that. And then closing the loop, as I said, through the different insights back into previous stages, and also making sure that we have a full overview of the service portfolio and how that will develop. And also in the middle, you have the service catalog, which is an important part which we provide to business, also describing what kind of services we do deliver and how to request them and so forth. And I have an example of a project that we are actually running currently. So where we are looking in different areas on this, and this is quite much focused on the service integration and automating service management in general. And the first area that is covered there is around the collaboration and communication and the code of conduct. So more of the communication is one important part of it, but then the actual way of working and the culture and the transparency throughout the organization is an important part to build the foundation for all the other areas, to make sure that we have trust in the organization, that we can have transparency, even though there are different service providers and vendors being involved in the service delivery, that we still can have the free flow of information and trust between the organizations, so that we share information, that we learn from each other, and all of that. So code of conduct, sometimes called also rules of the club, the key in that, to build that foundation for collaboration and make sure that we all work together. So we're trying to drive towards increased proactivity, so that all the different participants in the ecosystem will proactively work together to make sure that the overall end-to-end performance is improving, and not only looking at their own service delivery, but actually providing the value and the consumption throughout the business. The second area that's covered is the service integration, and this is the SIAM function, service integration and management function, to make sure that they have the right role and focus, and they have the right empowerment to actually drive the different service providers, even though if they are internal or external, but to make sure that end-to-end delivery is happening, and they have the right mandate and empowerment to drive that forward. We also need to make sure that we have the right agreements and contracts in place to support that. The third area is the maybe traditional but process realignment, to make sure that the processes that we are using in the operational space is simple to use, transparent and open, so it can flow throughout the ecosystem. And we had a situation where they were quite complex and inflexible, so we need to make sure that they are fit for use and efficient in the execution. And also there's an agile transformation in the development part going on, so we need to make sure that also in the operational and the run stage we align to that, to make sure that we can take over the results from the development and handle that in an efficient way. And the last area is more about the tooling part, where we work on the improving the level of automation and also a little bit of simplification in the tool setup, so make sure that it is smooth and user-friendly, and still keep the control and strengthen the efficiency and compliance, and make it easy to execute the processes through the tool support. So we're moving a little bit more from using the tool as a control mechanism to supporting mechanism to make the execution of the different processes more efficient, and also improving the possibility to coordinate and report and have the proper dashboards and information to the designated people in the organization. So I think that covers the services part. So I'll move on. I guess it's Henric after.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christian. And moving into the sourcing side, and Henric, please.
Thank you, Björn. Could you move one slide, please? So the sourcing optimization, this is an end-to-end discipline that manages the whole life cycle of both the business services and the vendor relationship. We need to be able to provide the right resources for the right purpose. We are looking at two separate purposes of this discipline. We want to be both creative and we want to optimize things. And the creative part is to where the traditional sourcing focuses on acquiring something to a lowest possible price point. The creative part is rather looking at building relationship and getting the best possible value out of the individual suppliers or vendors. The optimization purpose is basically meaning that we optimize the number of vendors, the number of contracts that we use, and the terms for those, so that we can make sure that we're providing the right resources at the right cost. So in order to do this, there are a number of different things we need to consider, and I'm going to point out a couple of them. We always need to keep track on the commercial and property rights. I mean, what are we buying and what are we only acquiring a right to use? That is really, really important now in this digitalization world that we are entering. The second one is around the how we manage the sourcing and purchasing contracts. And in order to do that to an excellent business and user satisfaction, we need to have control over the total cost of ownership as part of this discipline. It is a couple of conflicting areas here where we need to bring sourcing and purchasing together. And one of those are the scale of the projects that will be involved in order to accommodate refresh and renewal or establishing of such a sourcing contract. We also need to be able to enforce the policies and regulations from a security, architectural, legal point of view that the company has put in place. And last but not least, there is a need to manage the entire supplier ecosystem through its life cycle so that we can enable the necessary controls on those and sponsor the creative cooperation and innovations together with the partners. Couple of things to look into here is and a necessity here is we need to establish some sort of sourcing strategy so that we can indicate what the right sourcing approach will be, what the type of partners should be that we are engaging with. We need a sourcing process that supports the development initiative for creating new services or products, to support the existing solutions or services in the best possible way. We also need to establish functions so that we can streamline and make the use of established services in the best possible way. So some sort of process for acquiring already agreed services, as well as a process for agreeing how we procure resources in the best possible way will be part of setting up this discipline. Next area is looking in. No, sorry, you need to go back. We also need to look into the how we manage the relationship and the performance of the suppliers. And that is, of course, done together with service management, where sourcing is responsible for the overall relationship, and the service management is responsible for the day-to-day follow-up. Next in this is the financial planning and control. And as everyone is aware of, the recharging or the cost coverage for services is something that is always high on the agenda. And in order to do that, we need to have a possibility to establish a financial view, and that will also support the sourcing part. And we usually look at this in three ways. We have the business view, we have the finance view, and we have the services view, where we, from the business view, look at the services from a catalog perspective. The finance view is, of course, the spend part, and the services view is what solutions we have put in place and how we deliver those through service management. In order to do this, it can actually be useful to implement a model for financial transparency, and there is different standards for that, and the business technology model has a standardized way of looking at this and defining how we build up the services. Managing resources and assets as part of the ecosystem is something that we can do. We need to ensure that we can request subscriptions of standardized things, such as a software, in a very efficient way that is often done through a service catalog or order catalog with an end user perspective. But we also need to be able to support the deployment development phase by providing resources so that project managers, for an example, can request resources in a streamlined way. And that is done by another type of order structure where we can utilize the predefined agreements. So over to an example of a customer case where we were brought in to look at we started to look at the strategic mix of the supply landscape. This was a second generation sourcing where we found that the overlapping between the suppliers in place and the existing internal delivery organization, there was an overlap and there were some confusions in the clarification. So we did a review and looked into the individual strengths and opportunities within the different organizations. We created, based out of that, a strategic direction, and we made some tactical proposals for short-term renegotiations of some of the agreements. This created a joint view and a shared documentation of where the organization were and where they should be heading. This was also, of course, driven out of changes or new needs from the business side, where the business organization did undertake some changes in their setup. So based off of this, with a view and a strategy for how to move forward, there were some immediate things that needed to be taken care of. So we moved into looking into a couple of specific supply engagement, where we took a joint approach with those suppliers, and we looked into how we could best utilize the strength from those suppliers. So we took a sprint-based approach where we had the delivery organization involved together with the receiving organization, and they jointly looked into possible clarifications and sound structural changes to the services, and that then documented as a wish list for moving forward. And finally, we took a couple of those services and we renegotiated those into new supply contracts, hence optimizing the output and creating a more outcome-based price model where this was possible, and thereby creating a more flexible solution for the IT organization to support the business. So we can now hand over to
Okay, thank you, Henric. And now we're moving into strategy and governance. Gustaf, please.
Thank you. All right, so strategy and governance is the discipline that represents the part of the operating model that focuses on taking our strategies into plans and turning those plans into implementations where we create more or new or better capabilities. So here we work with strategic planning of ecosystems, processes, technology, in order to align those plans with any vision or strategic directives that we might have in our company. So turning those plans into realities where we spend most part of our work as Sofigate consultants within this discipline. And these 6 boxes that you can see, ranging from enterprise architecture down to security and data protection, is then where we do most of our job, or most of our work within this discipline. So if we start from left to right here, we have enterprise architecture, which is basically the activity where we structure and define our capabilities within our company as a response to the business goals or endeavors that we might have in our company as a whole company, not only the IT organization. So this includes defining our domains of processes, data, solutions, and also planning and driving transformation within those domains. And that's a part of what the enterprise architecture community or function does. If we take objectives and scorecards, which is the first part of the second box here, that refers to how we measure and target and measure success in our plans or our strategies, as well as the operational work that we do, how we set up these scorecards in order to have the best possible tracking mechanisms in place. It could also refer to setting up financial reporting models in order to track performance in that sense. The steering part of this capability is more referring to the governance mechanisms that we put in place. So in terms of our projects, this would be where we introduce some kind of smarter governance model. It might be a new governance process, mechanism, or a tool that we simply implement. And the third box here, I'd say this is where we spend perhaps most of our time right now, Sofigate consultants. This refers to the actual implementation of this operating model that my colleagues here have been talking about before me. We then design and implement this operating model. And there's a lot of different angles or goals that you try to achieve with a new operating model, and it differs from project to project, but most commonly you would look at trying to find unity in the company's way of working. You would also find the increased need for collaboration between a disparate or a decentralized organization, or simply that you're trying to create some form of single source of truth of our workflows or our processes where that's lacking, or in some case where that's not even existing in the company. More often than not, when we do these kind of projects, we also include the next box, which is competence and organizations. So when you do shifts in how we work and how we operate, you often need to look at, do we also need to do shifts in our competence bases, our competence landscapes, and do we need to look at how we organize our teams and our managers and specialized individuals, etc. So that's something that we almost always include in those kind of projects as well, as a part of strategy and governance. The last two boxes is about risk, quality, compliance, and ethics, as well as security and data protection. The work that we do here could be everything from implementing a new compliance tool to overseeing or reshaping an entire framework for how we work with cybersecurity. We're implementing new teams, finding the right resources that you need in your company to work with cybersecurity in a professional manner. And all of these disciplines or sub-disciplines within strategy and governance is, of course, then just as sourcing optimization was running a cross-plan, build, run. So everything that my colleagues just talked about, this is sitting on top of that, and something that you need to have in place in order to then go in and look at how do we handle demand management and our demand portfolio, as well as our service portfolio. And I too am going to show a case, or customer case, that we've been working on and that I've been a part of. And this is a case where we included a lot of the boxes that you now saw and that I introduced you to. For about 18 months, we worked with this customer in a quite large, almost program-like project, including of several streams. There's a lot of people working on it, and a whole lot more people being affected by this project. And the problems or issues that the customer faced before deciding to start this initiative was a grouping of issues or challenges, you might say. First of all, their vision for the company was to become, like many other companies, more digital, or driving towards being able to offer technology-based services to their customers. And for this, they decided that they needed a stronger or more capable IT organization to support that whole journey. And first of all, they said that, or they acknowledged that they had very little collaboration between a very decentralized number of teams in their IT organization. And those teams or departments of IT were small in size, and hence they could not find that the bandwidth that they needed to be more sophisticated or have any kind of specialized team setups in those small departments. And they also had challenges when it comes to tracking and following up on the activities and the financial performance that they did or that they had, where they didn't have any common financial reporting methods in place, so they couldn't really see the truth in those numbers, at least not a comparable truth. So what we did, if I just pick three of the focuses or aspects that we worked on within this program. First of all, we then did the operating model implementation at this customer, where we designed and implemented an operating model. By doing this, we created a common language of how we work, as well as how we govern. So in this very formally decentralized organization, we created a understanding for what people outside of my own team is doing, and I can relate to what other people within the organization is trying to achieve. And we quite soon afterwards saw a increased collaboration between teams and cross countries, cross business lines. We also saw a lowered investment rates in the wrong things, if we might call it that, the things that are not sponsored by our strategies and by our overall plans as a company. Parallel to this, we also then, like I said before, most of the times we work with organization and the competences that we need. We also did a consolidation of the IT organization. where we took a lot of the different departments that we had scattered around the globe, and we put them under one umbrella. In many cases, they got new roles or additional roles, and they got new positions that they would recognize across borders, across business lines. And this helped increasing the bandwidth. We all now worked within one organization, and we were one team more so than before. So increasing that bandwidth that we needed to introduce technologies at scale at a global level instead of at a local level only. And also increased our ability to utilize resources wherever we might locate them. If there's a specialist in Hungary or a specialist in the US, we had no problem now finding it and utilizing it. So you could say that we increased the ability to leverage the knowledge that we knew was somewhere within our organization. And finally, we also tackle the problem of not being able to fully follow up or track the financial performance or the performance of our activities in a transparent way. So we introduce also a financial model, a common financial reporting structure that allowed us to measure and track activities all over the globe in the same way. Meaning we got the comparability that we needed to find the truth in matters, and also a smarter way of handling the sharing of technology between entities and teams by introducing a chargeback model in this financial reporting system or reporting scheme. So that's what we did, along with a lot of other things with this customer, and we've done similar things with other customers. So if you have any questions on this case or on any of the boxes that I introduced here, you feel free to contact me any way you see fit. Thank you.
Thank you, Gustaf. And that concludes the content of the webinar. Just to summarize, we went through the demand discipline with Anna, the development discipline with Klaus, the service discipline with Christian, sourcing with Henric, and strategy and governance with Gustaf. Thank you so much. If you have questions, please use the chat box. And while you think and write your questions, I would like to share the contact details for the people in the webinar. Janet, do we have any questions coming in? Okay. The next webinar will be focused on tools to support the operating model, and we will invite a number of specialists to present both the tools that we use for the operating model, but also show some cases from leading companies, both within demand development and service side, but of course also sourcing and the strategy and governance side. So thank you so much for listening, and welcome back.